right, so my talk is called How to Get a Job When You Don't Have Experience. My name is Kendall. I'm married with 2 kids. I am the president of Techlahoma. I was a chemical engineer for 10 years, and I'm now a full stack developer with Bayer Crop Science. I also like to bake and make beer. So, how I transitioned to a tech career. I always liked programming. I had actually, when I entered college, I had told everyone I was going to be a computer science major, but I got a little scared off from it. One of the courses you had to take was an electrical engineering course in order to get a computer science degree for some reason, and I did not like electricity and magnetism in physics, so I was not excited about this electrical engineering course. So instead of that, I took a senior level AI course as a sophomore, and that was a terrible idea, and I did not end up completing that degree. So I became a chemical engineer, and I was doing that for 10 years until about a year and a half ago. I got sick of travel and layoffs and all kinds of junk, and decided to try to become a software developer. So I was laid off in June of 2019 because I refused to take a job that required 70% travel. So that doesn't sound fun. So I decided to start developing, and I had developed, I had done some programming, mostly for fun. And a little bit, I had a job where I wrote engineering code for like 20% of the time for a couple of years. So I had been developing, but I was nowhere near like professional level. I did not really know how to use version control, things like this. So I started an LLC in June of 2019 so that I could work on some projects. And then in November, I applied to be an outreach intern. An outreach internship is for underrepresented groups in tech. And basically you work on you get paid a little to work on an open source project for about 3 months. And you get a mentor and everything. So that's a really cool opportunity. And then I got a job 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, amazingly enough. So that sounds easy, right? So you might have heard my story and said, "Oh, well, that doesn't apply to me, Kendall. I'm not an engineer. I can't make an LLC. I'm not an underrepresented group." Yeah, I mean, my story. Everyone's going to be different, and everyone's entrance into the industry is going to be a little different. So I try and take a few topics from my story, and to sort of help guide other people. There are some things that you can take from my story, is what I'm saying, to help you try and find a job. So the 3 main things I talk about are you have to get connections, you have to do some work, and you have to apply an interview. So the get connections part is probably the most important part. It is it's who you know. It's who you know. It's pretty much just who you know. But Kendall, is it really who you know? Well, I got my internship through someone I know. I got my job through someone I know. And I got 80% of my interviews through people that I met at Tulsa Web Devs meetups. So yeah, it really helps. I mean, you can send out 1,000 resumes and maybe you'll get 10 interviews and maybe you'll get 1 job from that. But the chances of you landing a job are much, much, much higher if you're talking to people that you know about the opportunities that they have at their companies, or about the opportunities that they've heard about through other people. Like it's very important who you know. So how do you build a network? How do you make connections? So obviously user groups, conferences, and networking events are all very good for this. user groups. These things are also kind of hard to do right now since we're in the middle of a pandemic. But Techlahoma has lots of virtual user groups. So I think those are still useful and still useful for networking. You can also try the brute force method, is what I like to call it. I learned about this a couple weeks ago. One of the ladies at She Codes did a presentation on how she landed her job as a data scientist. So she broke into the data science area, and the way that she started networking was she started connecting with people on LinkedIn, and then she would message them and set up a virtual call with them. She did this during the pandemic. So in, I think it was like 3 months, she contacted lots of people on LinkedIn, met up with them, had virtual calls with them, talked to them about, what's your job like? What is the industry like? How did you get your job? How, what do you work on? Like, she was very interested in the industry as a whole, and she used that to connect with these people, and that's how she eventually got a job. And if you do that, you're going to be at the top of everyone's mind, right? You're going to remember that woman who reached out to you on LinkedIn and was really, really into data science and really wanted a job. So so that worked really, really well for her. I thought it was really cool. And then the last thing, Twitter is also a good place to make connections. So you can talk about what you're working on Twitter. You can ask questions on Twitter. There's a huge tech community on Twitter. It's big. And then the last one is give talks. So the ones I've started, I'm going to talk about a little bit more. But you might say, Kendall, I've been to user groups and conferences, and I don't understand anything that they're talking about. Yeah, that's pretty normal. I doubt anyone at user groups and conferences understands everything that everyone is talking about, because then they wouldn't necessarily need to go, at least for the educational aspect. I think that's really common, and I think as a entry level or junior level developer, it's still really, really important that you go to these things, because even if you don't understand what they're talking about, you pick up jargon, you pick up vocabulary, like you have an idea what Kubernetes is. Maybe you have never used Kubernetes before. I certainly haven't, but you have an idea what it is. And if it's brought up in conversation during an interview or whenever, you don't have to be like, well, I don't know what that is. You can talk about, you can talk about it in with some context, and that'll really help. And I like to tell the story of one of my interview questions. Someone asked me about the difference between a SQL and a NoSQL database. And I had never used a NoSQL database. And the only SQL databases I'd used were just sort of set up for me, and I didn't know much about them. But I had heard someone talking about it at a user group. And I remember what they said. And so I basically just said the same thing. I said, oh, well, NoSQL databases don't scale great, and like a Postgres type database is good because it's a hybrid. And I didn't fully understand what I was saying, but it really helped in the interview, and it worked. So, all right. Next is give talks. This makes people very uncomfortable. I get it. But even like a 5-minute lightning talk can be so helpful. I got my first interviews after I did a lightning talk at Tulsa Web Devs, and I said at the end of it, I actually forgot, and I walked down off the stage, and then I ran back up real quick to the microphone, and I said, oh, by the way, and I'm looking for a job. So I got my first interviews after that, and then you don't have to talk. So when you give a talk, you don't have to talk about something brand new or something breakthrough. You can talk about anything, literally anything, somewhere. And this, I don't know if it is unique to the tech industry, but when you go to a tech conference, a lot of times those conferences try to have basic level talks, not just all, this new fancy framework, but also like, oh, and here's how you use map, and filter on arrays. So whatever you want to talk about, whatever you've just learned, someone out there is interested in that. There may be a 10-year senior level C# developer who just doesn't know that much about JavaScript and wants to learn. And your talk could help them, even though you've only been doing JavaScript for a couple of months. So there are always people out there who want to hear what you have to talk about. So give talks. Do the work. Next section. So make sure your GitHub looks good, basically. You need to have projects under your belt to show people that you do know that you can do this. You can apply the concepts, right? So you can work on personal projects, you can work on volunteer projects, you can work on stuff for friends. Even if you just do an online tutorial, push that up to GitHub. That is impressive to have, in GitHub. So put all that stuff on GitHub. Do things for people that if your friend needs a website or something. And then I mentioned earlier that I made an LLC. And thinking back on that was probably a really wise decision, because as soon as I was laid off, I started this LLC, and then I worked for that LLC until I started my internship in November. And I don't have a gap on my resume because of that. And that's not really why I did it. But thinking back on that, like that was a smart move, right? So what I was doing during that time was I was working on a project that I believed to be marketable. And because of that, I was like expensing stuff like my Udemy classes. I was also a very base level programmer, so I was learning. And I knew that, but I was also thinking that one day I could sell this product. So you can do this. You don't have to make money. You can also freelance for people if someone needs a website or something. If you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can write them a website. And you don't have to make money to expense stuff like monitors and laptops and things you might need, because it can be expensive. Studying tech can be expensive if you need new equipment. All right. So apply and interview. Apply everywhere. Apply to remote positions. If you need to be in a certain location, apply everywhere in your town. If you don't care where you work, apply everywhere. Okay, but what places are good for newbies? This is literally any place that will pay you to sit in front of a computer all day and code. I stole this from a friend of mine, but this is what he tells people, because this is very true. As soon as someone starts paying you, you're not having to do this in your spare time. You can make money off of it. You're going to get a lot better, a lot quicker as soon as you start a full-time job. If you're worried about things like, well, are they good at mentoring? Is it a good workplace for women? Like, these are real concerns. I would start asking around about the company with some of the connections that you've made. But again, like being paid to sit and code you're going to get so much better at it so much quicker if you can focus on that. And then you can move on to another job, hopefully pretty soon after that. All right. And then during the interview, always interview. Even if you don't think you're going to get the job, even if you think it's crazy, interview for Google. If they want to interview you, do it. Even if you don't think you're going to make it. In June of 2019, when I first got laid off, I interviewed for a contract position with Mozilla, and I knew I wasn't going to get it because I knew who the other person also interviewing for the position was, and she was amazing. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to get it, but it's probably good just for the experience. For the experience interviewing, you'll be better at the next interview. So every time you interview, you'll get better. And also, people will know you. So the hiring manager for that position, they picked the other person, but he knew who I was. And then when I came in for the outreachy internship, I was probably, I don't know if that helped, but he knew me. And so it was easier for me to get started there. All right. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to show you was the resume I used to get my first job. Hopefully you can see this.
Yep, it's showing up.
All right. So I added this blurb at the top to, oh God, what have I done? To sort of explain myself, because it's like, yeah, I know it looks like I'm a chemical engineer, but don't worry, I'm not really a chemical engineer. I'm really a software developer. So I added a little blurb up at the top, but also the LLC that I started is called Risk Consulting, and I listed the project that I had been working on, and I worked on it for between June and November. What is that? 4 or 5 months, pretty much every day. So that's listed on there as one of the projects. Also, some freelance work that I did for a friend of mine at the same time is also listed on there. And then what else did I want to show you? Any of the courses I took, I listed under skills. And then at the bottom, I listed open source contributions. It was a little weird where to put this on the resume, but I wanted to make sure it was on here because this was good coding work that I did. And I didn't get paid for it, but it should be on here, right?